They say a man's home is his castle, right? Well, let me tell you something. You don't really believe that. Not until you're standing in a cloud of dust watching the castle crumble. A bulldozer clawing through your living room, and some smug guy in a hard hat waving a piece of paper in your face. I came home from 6 weeks on the road. 6 weeks spent visiting my daughter, my grandkids, watching Little League games and eating burnt pancakes. And what do I find? Not a quiet sunrise on my porch, not the coffee I was dreaming about, but a damn wrecking ball chewing through the walls I'd built with my own 2 hands. Yeah, that happened. And if you think that's wild, just wait. They even crushed my late wife's piano, the one she played every night, her fingers coaxing those old hymns into the air until the music drifted out over the lake. I remember the sound, how soft and sad it was after she died, how I'd sit on the steps just to feel close to her again. Gone now. Smashed to splinters, keys scattered like broken teeth in the dirt. The foreman, big guy, looked like he could arm wrestle a refrigerator, shoved a paper at me with this look like he was doing me a favor. "You're in the HOA now," he said. My signature at the bottom. Except it wasn't mine. That was the moment everything snapped. Let me back up a sec. 6 weeks earlier, I'd locked the door to my house, absolutely certain it'd be right there waiting for me. That morning, as I turned my old RV down the gravel drive, all I was thinking about was coffee on the porch, maybe frying up some eggs if the mood struck. It was just after 6. The sun was low, orange lights spilling across the lake, mist curling up in lazy ribbons. The tires crunched the gravel, that sound that always meant I was home. Safe. But then, I smelled it. Not the cedar smoke or fresh pine I was used to. No, this was diesel, bitter and sharp, the stench of destruction. 30 years as fire chief, and I'd learned to hate that smell. It meant something precious was burning. My chest tightened. I rounded the bend, and there it was, an excavator perched on my lawn like a beast, jaws full of my walls. Men in yellow hard hats moved around like they'd done this 100 times, totally indifferent. Clouds of dust rose, blotting out the sun. My cedar porch, my kitchen window, the roof I'd shingled myself, ruined. I slammed the RV in a park so hard the engine shuddered, boots hitting the gravel before I even realized I'd moved. The porch, where my wife and I had sat sipping coffee every morning for 22 years, splintered. The living room wall leaned, crooked as a tombstone. Through the hollow gap of my kitchen, the lake shimmered, so calm it might as well have been laughing at me. And there, half buried under drywall, was her piano. Mahogany wood shattered, the keys scattered everywhere. That piano was my gift for our 25th anniversary. I kept it polished after she passed. It was the one thing that made the place still feel like home. And now? Now it was trash. Something inside me just broke. My legs carried me forward before my brain caught up, and suddenly a man in an orange vest was blocking my way, clipboard clutched like a shield. "Sir, you can't be here. Active demolition site." His voice was so flat, so tired, like I was just another hassle in a long day. "This is my home," I managed, voice catching. He just sighed, flipped his clipboard. Notice was posted. "You're 6 months behind on HOA dues. First letter went out half a year ago." The words rattled around my skull. HOA dues. I'd made damn sure my land wasn't part of their neighborhood when I bought it. 12 acres, staked out and recorded separately. "I'm not in your HOA," I said, my voice sharper now. "My property line ends a quarter-mile before your subdivision. You got no authority here." He just smirked, tapped the page. "You are now." And behind him, the excavator roared to life again. Another wall collapsed, dust swallowing the piano, the porch, every memory. That's when it hit me. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate. Someone decided to erase me. The foreman's words hung heavier than the dust. "You are now." I stared at him, waiting for a sign this was some joke, some clerical mess-up. Nothing. To him, I wasn't a person, just an obstacle. "You can't just make me part of your HOA," I said, steady and cold. The kind of voice I used at fire scenes when everyone else was losing their heads. "That's not how the law works." He just shrugged. "Talk to your board. We just follow orders." And he turned, barking at his crew. The excavator swung down, smashing the last of my kitchen wall. I stood there, fists clenched, heart pounding, rage sharp as a blade. But under it was this chilling clarity. This was theft, just wrapped up in paperwork. When the crew finally left, engines grumbling down the road. The silence felt worse than the noise. Dust floated lazily in the morning light. I walked to the end of the driveway. My mailbox, stuffed to bursting. Flyers, bills, and 2 envelopes stamped with the same header, Heron Creek Estates HOA. My stomach dropped. First envelope was a certified letter, return receipt card still attached, and signed, since I hadn't been there. I tore it open, nearly $3,000 in dues and late fees. To an association I'd never joined. For property never within their boundaries. Cold, legal language, full of threats. The second envelope, worse. HOA meeting minutes, 1 paragraph circled in red. A motion passed to annex the Whitaker property, retroactive, to ensure aesthetic cohesion of lakefront views. I read it again and again, hands shaking, not with fear, but with fury. They'd held a meeting while I was gone. Taken a vote. Claimed my land. I dropped the papers. 22 years ago, I'd walked this land with surveyors, driven iron stakes deep, filed the deed myself. I watched the subdivision rise, cul-de-sacs named after trees that didn't even exist. I smiled, knowing my land was mine. But standing in the shadow of my destroyed home, I realized a piece of paper didn't protect you from people willing to forge signatures, bend maps, bulldoze the truth. The piano, the porch, my wife's memory, scattered in the dirt. But something harder had taken root in me. If they thought paperwork would erase me, they had no idea who they were messing with. I folded the letter, slid it in my pocket, and turned back to the ruins. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I sat in the RV, engine idling, staring out at what used to be my life. The HOA letters felt heavy in my pocket, but heavier still was this memory. Clawing back from a decade ago, this wasn't the first time someone tried to take my land. 12 years earlier, before Heron Creek was even a sign on the road, the developer came calling. Richard Thompson. Polished black SUV, shoes too shiny for gravel, smile too slick for honesty. Mr. Whitaker, he said, you're sitting on prime property. Lakefront, highway access, perfect for premium lots. He waved a folder thick with contracts, named a number big enough to buy a house 3 states over. But I didn't need another house. I had a wife who played piano every night. I had 12 acres we cleared ourselves. So I told him, no. Not politely. Not gently. Just no. To his credit, Thompson didn't get mad. Just smiled like a guy who thought he'd win anyway. Everyone has a price, Chief. Sooner or later. But I didn't sell. Instead, we made a different deal. Build your subdivision, I said. Pave your streets, sell your lots, but my 12 acres stay mine. Separate. Untouchable. Surveyors marked the line, iron stakes driven so deep you could hang a house on them. Thompson's men filed the maps. I held the deed. Separate parcel, ironclad. I remember shaking his hand in the twilight. Neighbors then, he said. That was all. I watched Heron Creek rise. Cookie-cutter houses, neat mailboxes, flags that never strayed from the approved list. Meanwhile, my dock was weathered, my grass a little too long, and nobody could say a damn thing about it. Or so I thought. Now, turning the HOA letter over in my hands, that red circled paragraph glaring up at me, I realized they'd never forgotten I'd said no. My land, my view, had always been the jewel they couldn't quite claim. With Thompson gone, the board found a new weapon, paperwork. Linda Roswell, president, wrote about me on their forum, Uncooperative Lakefront Property. I laughed at that. I wasn't uncooperative. I was independent, and that drove them nuts. I walked through the ruins, remembering those iron stakes, the survey maps, the deed in my hand. They thought a vote in a beige room could erase all that. Not a chance. They could crush my house, smash my wife's piano, but the ground beneath us told a different story. It was mine. The HOA had drawn a line in the sand. But if there's one thing you learn fighting fires, it's that you don't back down from a blaze. You find the source and you fight. I looked at the rubble and felt the resolve settle in me like iron. If they wanted a war, they'd get one. The rubble was still smoking when I dragged a half-burned chair out, set a cooler as a desk, and spread out the paperwork. Warnings, threats, final notices. But what really caught my eye was the so-called membership agreement. Supposedly proof I was part of Heron Creek. My name at the bottom in thick black ink, except it wasn't my hand. Whoever forged it had tried to mimic my old fire chief signature, but it was sloppy. The W sagged, The T's were wrong. And the timestamp? 2:27 a.m. When I was asleep in my daughter's guest room in Denver. I had photos from that night. Receipts. Ironclad proof this was a lie. Underneath the anger, that old calm took over. The one that comes when you're staring down a burning building, planning your attack. This wasn't just arrogance. It was fraud. A crime, dressed up legal. I gathered every document, stuffed them into the battered fireproof box from my office. Labeled the folder, evidence. Then I noticed the notary seal in the corner. Crooked, blurred, name I didn't recognize. That was the thread. The place to pull. I closed my eyes and saw Thompson's smug grin. Everyone sells, sooner or later. Maybe he was wrong about me. The HOA learned. If they couldn't buy me out, they'd just forge me in. The sound of loons echoed across the lake. My house was gone, my wife's piano splintered, but I wasn't broken. Not yet. Now here's the twist. Turns out, I wasn't the only one. Walking the edge of Heron Creek, I started talking to neighbors. First was a guy named Hank. White hair, sunburnt skin, a carpenter's hands. "You're Whitaker," he said. I nodded. "They took your house, didn't they?" "Yeah." He grimaced. "Fined me $2,000 last year. Said my fence crossed 6 inches over the line. Do you know what that did to my savings?" He didn't need an answer. Further down, a widow in her 70s waved me over. "They told me my shutters were the wrong shade of beige," she whispered. "Charged me $1,000 to repaint them. Beige is beige, but not to them." She looked down, voice cracking. "I just paid. It was easier than fighting. I couldn't." I squeezed her hand. "You shouldn't have had to." Story after story. A couple forced to tear down their kid's playset. A veteran threatened with foreclosure for parking his RV. Bully, threaten, collect. That was the rhythm. And then, a woman loading groceries looked around, then whispered, "Linda Roswell. She runs the board. If you cross her, you lose your home. Everyone knows it." She hurried away before I could say anything. Fear was everywhere. But under it, something else, hope. I realized I wasn't alone. This was bigger than me. Next morning, I called in a favor. Stitch Mollery, a grizzled old engineer, limp from a war wound, hands like steel traps. We hadn't worked together in years, but when he stepped out of his battered pickup, I felt steadier already. He circled the wreckage, measuring, poking. "This wasn't a collapse, Jack," he said. "This was an execution." He launched a drone, swept it over the foundation, handed me printouts, clean lines, no cracks, no rot. Your house was solid. If the HOA justified demolition, they needed a forged inspection report. Stitch tapped the memory card. "Keep this safe. It's Exhibit A." I headed to the courthouse. The clerk handed me a single inspection report. Foundation settling, roof instability, hazard to safety, signed by Bill Johnson. Except it wasn't. Bill spelled his name with an E, Johnson. I called him. "Jack, I haven't inspected your property in 20 years, he said. "Send me the signature." He didn't even hesitate. "That's not mine. Never has been." Now I had proof, more than just my word. But I wanted the smoking gun. Digital age, right? I opened the PDF of the demolition permit, the one the foreman shoved at me. Scrolled through the metadata. Modified at 2:27 a.m. Author Linda R. She hadn't even bothered to scrub her name. I screenshot it. Save copies everywhere. This wasn't just my word against hers. It was her word against her own fingerprints. Sheriff Miller's office was the next stop. I laid out every piece, forged signatures, drone photos, metadata, neighbor stories. He listened, face getting grimmer with every page. "This isn't their first land grab," he said, "but it might be the last." He showed me an old folder, 6 other complaints, all folks who'd been threatened, fined, bullied into silence. No one ever fought back. Until you. That night, I called each of them. Samuel Green, bled $2,000 over a fence. Evelyn Carter, forced to repaint her shutters. The Millers, denied a ramp for their wheelchair-bound mother-in-law. Each story another nail in Linda's coffin. By sundown, I wasn't fighting alone anymore. The next HOA meeting was electric. Neighbors packed the clubhouse, whispering, watching. Linda Roswell sat at the front, gavel in hand, pearls gleaming. I stood at the back, evidence folder under my arm. She tried to bulldoze through business as usual. I raised my voice. "Point of order." Heads turned. "You demolished my home. That makes it my business." Linda banged the gavel, threatened to have me thrown out. I didn't move. Dropped the folder on the table, evidence spilling everywhere. Go ahead, Linda. Tell them how you forged my signature. Tell them why your name's in the metadata at 2:27 a.m. The room went silent. Linda's face drained. Lies, she shrieked. But then Samuel Green stood. They bled me over a fence. Evelyn Carter rose, voice trembling. They forced me to repaint shutters that were already beige. The Millers, the couple with the ramp, wheeled their mother-in-law forward. She wouldn't let us build it. One by one, the room filled with voices. Linda's gavel cracked, wild. All of you sit down or face fines. But tonight, no one sat. Sheriff Miller stepped in. Badge flashing, silent but deadly serious. The board crumbled. Linda looked for allies, none left. Her gavel slipped from her hand, clattering on the floor. For the first time, she had nothing to say. I walked out into the night. Neighbors behind me, not whispers but thunder. But Linda wasn't gone yet. She still drove her Lexus by my ruined home, chin high. Thought she could ride out the storm. She didn't know the storm was already at her door. Sheriff Miller called me in. State attorney had signed off. Fraud, forgery, destruction of private property. The warrant with Linda's name in bold. We rolled into Heron Creek. Neighbors peeking from windows. Linda answered the door, pearls, lipstick, perfect as ever. Sheriff, to what do I owe the pleasure? Linda Roswell, you are under arrest, Miller said. Her smile froze. This is ridiculous. I run this community. Not anymore, I said. The metadata doesn't lie. Neither does Bill Johnson. The crowd watched as they cuffed her in front of her roses. Phones raised. Evelyn Carter called out. You made me paint my shutters twice. Samuel Green, you stole my savings. The Millers, you denied her a ramp. The air was thick. Anger, relief, vindication. They loaded Linda into the car, her voice low, venomous. This isn't over, Whitaker. I leaned close. Oh, it's over. You just don't know it yet. The car rolled away. Some cried. Some just stared. The Queen was gone. The courtroom was quiet as church. I sat at the plaintiff's table, evidence stacked, every sleepless night distilled into paper. Linda sat across from me, pearls at her throat, smirk on her lips. The prosecution laid it out. Demolition permit with my forged signature. Inspection report Bill never signed. Metadata screaming Linda R. Her own forum posts. Linda tried to argue, but the jury wasn't buying it. When the verdict came, it rang like a bell. Guilty on all counts. 5 years for fraud and forgery, plus restitution. The HOA's insurance wrote a check, enough to rebuild, plus damages. Not victory, but vindication. I rebuilt the house, kept the design close but stronger. Helped the Millers build their ramp, just like I promised. Heron Creek became a real community. Neighbors pitching in, no more arbitrary rules. One night, I set the salvaged piano hinge on my new mantle, a reminder. They could destroy wood and glass, but not what mattered. Not the fight. Not the truth. So what do you think? Was that justice? Or just another chapter in the endless battle between right